Hello everyone, this is Niall from windowsnoob.com, and today I'm going to talk some more about MBAM BitLocker management. This is part 4 of a video series from Microsoft Endpoint Manager, Configuration Manager version 1910. Today we're going to talk about enforcing encryption on your Windows 10 clients. So why would we want to be doing that? Well, if we look at Config Manager, we created an MBAM policy here in the first video of this series. And what this policy does is it enforces the encryption algorithm type and various other settings on our clients. But what it also does is, let's go to the client experience. It tells the MDOP client agent to pop up this pop-up to the end users, right? And the thing here is that the end user has the choice to postpone or start the encryption. Now, users being users, they're probably going to do this, or they're going to click on the X. Either of those two actions will just basically hide the pop-up until the next MBAM policy kicks in. In our lab, that is every 3 minutes. In production, it will be more like every 90 minutes with default settings. And as you can see, this computer is fully decrypted. In other words, it is not BitLockered and not protected. So what we want to do is we want to protect it. And to enforce that, currently in Config Manager 1910, we can't do it with policy alone. So if we take a look at the policy itself, what we have here are some algorithms for encryption that we've defined for our drives. We've also defined some BitLocker TPM settings, pin length, and whether operating system drive encryption is set or not. And here we have configured a BitLocker management services, and we decide what to do with the keys. And here is where we tell it to check for policy every 3 minutes because it's a lab. So every 3 minutes, the MDOP client will talk back to the MBAM management point and basically, check for policy. Has policy changed? Am I compliant? If not, pop up the message to the end user, right? So as we can see, here it is again. Let's just close this. All right. So here is the pop-up again. And like I said, the user could click on postpone or click X to close it. And fully decrypted. Nothing is happening. It is not encrypting, right? So it won't encrypt this computer or any of my computers until the user clicks start. So to get around that, we can create 2 registry keys that need to be populated here. And here's the path. It's HKey local machine, software, policies, Microsoft, FVE for full volume encryption, and then MDOP BitLocker management. And that's the same path as you would see on any standard MBAM managed computer. So these are the settings that the MBAM client agent has set. And you can see our recovery services endpoint is our local config manager lab, and it's HTTPS, and various other settings, right? But what we're missing here are 2 additional keys, and those 2 additional keys will do what we want, which is they will enforce MBAM to start encryption as soon as possible with no user input. So the user does not have to do anything once we've done this. Okay, so how do we do it? Well, let's go to the Config Manager console. And we're going to create something called configuration items and configuration baselines. All right, so let's first create a configuration baseline and give it a suitable name. and we'll call it enforce MBAM encryption. And we can give it a category. All right, and just click OK. So that's our baseline created. Enforce MBAM encryption. And now let's go to configuration items and create a configuration item. This configuration item we'll use to create the 2 registry keys that we need on the client to start the encryption auto-magically. All right, so let's give it a name as well. Enforce MBAM encryption. Contains 2 registry settings. Now, the registry settings are based upon the following, let's see, where is it? Here. The following group policy for MBAM, right? And this is from the MBAM documentation, not the config manager MBAM documentation. So if you read this particular setting, it says encryption policy enforcement settings. Suggested configuration enabled. Use this policy setting to configure the number of days that fixed data drives can remain non-compliant until they are forced to comply with MBAM policies. Users cannot postpone the required action or request an exemption from it after the grace period. Blah, blah, blah. Enter 0 in the configure the number of non-compliant grace period days for fixed drives to force the encryption process to begin immediately after the grace period expires, right? So that's what we're going to effectively do. We're going to populate this registry key with a value of 0. And the key part here is if you disable or do not configure this setting, users are not forced to comply with MBAM policies. So by not having this registry key plus another key, encryption will never start unless the end user physically clicks on start. So that's what we're going to replicate here, okay? So let's go back to the console. We've created our configuration manager baseline, our compliance baseline, and now we'll create the CI. And this one, we're going to select this configuration item contains application settings. We can assign a category to it if we want, or create a new one, and click next. And we'll click next again, and this is where things get interesting. On the settings window, let's click on new, and here is where we can add our registry keys. So the first one, we're going to give it a name. Let's just get those keys I need, and we'll call it OS enforce policy period, right? And that was basically the group policy that we were just looking at. And the setting type, it's a registry value, and we want it set to integer. And the reason we want it set to integer is because this registry value needs to be a D word, right? A reg D word. And if it isn't, it's not going to work. Okay, so let's populate the actual path. And the path of this reg key needs to be HKey local machine, software policies, Microsoft FVE MDOP BitLocker management. And let's take this and put the value there, right? So we've set the name, and it's a registry value. It must be an integer in order to set reg D word. And here is our OS enforce policy period reg key. And this is the one that we need created. So let's go to compliance rules. We need to create a rule. And the rule is going to be create key with 0 days. Okay, so we're going to enforce this one as 0 and make sure to remediate non-compliant rules when supported. If we don't do this, it will not populate that registry key. Okay, so let's click on OK. So we've got compliance rules set up to remediate. As you can see, remediate yes. And we've got the key here and the path of the key and the name of it. And we're going to click on apply. All right. So that's our first registry value. Remember I said we need 2 registry values. Let's do the same process again for the second registry value that we need. And this registry key here basically is telling us, well, are we going to use the OS enforce policy or not? And obviously we want to use it. And again, we need it to be a reg_d word. So now let's put in the full path. It's the same path as before. So we'll copy that path and just paste it in there. So there it is. So we've got this, the name is use OS enforce policy. It needs to be a registry value, an integer. We paste in the full path of the registry key and the name of the registry key itself. And make sure to tick the box to create the registry value as a reg_d word data type. Otherwise, this is not going to work. Next, we have to do a compliance rule and set reg key value to 1. And 1 means it's going to be enabled. So we'll set it to 1 like so. And we want to remediate. Okay? So we want to remediate non-compliant rules when supported. So it's basically going to create that key if it doesn't exist and set the value to 1. All right? So let's apply. Click OK. So we now have 2 registry values added to our CI. And both of them are going to do some remediation. And compliance rules, it's showing you there. This one needs to be set to 0. This one needs to be set to 1. And we'll just continue through that. This is only going to be applicable for Windows 10. All right. And let's continue. Okay, so now we've created our CI with the 2 reg keys. The next thing we need to do is add that CI to our configuration baseline. So we'll go into our configuration baseline. And in evaluation conditions, we can do this, add our configuration item that we've created before. And there it is. Just add it and click OK. So we've now added our CI to our CB. Okay. And let's click apply. The only thing that we haven't done here is we haven't deployed it yet. So before deploying it, I'm just going to quickly create a collection under device collections. So we'll create a device collection and we'll call it enforce MBAM encryption. And we're going to limit it to all Windows 10. And we'll just do that. We're not going to populate it yet. Okay, so now we have a collection called enforce MBAM encryption. Let's go back to our baseline and let's deploy our baseline to that collection. Now, here is our configuration baseline, and make sure to select remediate non-compliant rules when supported. All right. So now we're going to target it to the collection we just created, which is a device collection, and there it is. We'll populate that in a minute. And because this is a lab and we want to see the results very quickly, I'm going to set it to run every 1 minute. Now, don't do this in production. That would just be crazy. But this is a lab, so we want to see the magic happening quickly. And that's the reason why I'm setting it to run this schedule to check for compliance evaluation every 1 minute. All right. So make sure remediate non-compliant rules when supported is selected, and we'll click OK. So now we've deployed our configuration baseline, which contains our configuration item, which sets 2 reg keys. And the remaining thing that we need to do now is go back to our client, which is this one here. And if we look at the client and just bring up the configuration manager, let's just bring up the configuration manager client agent. And if we look at the agent and under configurations, you'll see that we only have one configuration, and that is one CI, and that is our MBAM policy itself, right? And it's non-compliant because this computer is not encrypted, as we can see, right? And it will just keep on doing that forever until we actually deploy these registry keys. So, excuse me. So let's get the name of this computer. And let's add that computer to that collection we just created in Config Manager. So let's go back here. And we'll find that device. I think it's this one. And we'll add that to our collection. And that's pretty much it. So let's just verify that it appears in the collection. Not there yet. So it needs to be in the collection. There it is. It's in the collection. It needs to be in the collection in order to get the policy, right? So if we do this, client notification, download computer policy, what it should do is download the policy that contains this configuration baseline, compliance baseline. So let's go to the client. And on the client, if we click refresh a few times, what we should hopefully see is the new configuration. There it is. It's come in, right? So here is our enforce MBAM encryption CI compliance baseline, and at the moment it hasn't been evaluated, and we don't know the compliance. So if we click on evaluate, it says compliant. So that would tell me that it has populated 2 new reg keys. So let's just verify and see are things working as planned. And they are. So here is the OS enforce policy period, and it's set to 0. And if we look down here, we have use OS enforce policy, and that's set to 1. So as you can see, they are reg D words, and that's exactly what they need to be. So our CI has done its job, and it's created the 2 registry keys on the client. So the only other thing now is for the MDOP client agent to realize that it is going to enforce encryption. So why don't we just look at that? It's still fully decrypted, but we know that MBAM is going to refresh the policy on this one every 3 minutes. So let's just check when it is doing that refresh, and then we will see basically when it's going to start encrypting, because at the moment it's still fully decrypted. Right, so if we go to the application logs, expand Windows, and let's go down to the MBAM event viewer logs and operational. So in here we'll see exactly when it's checking for policy, and the last time was 2:20, and I note that it says recovery key escrowed. Okay, really? So it's 2:21 here. Let's see what we have going on. Look at that. Encryption in progress, and the user didn't have to do anything. So in other words, what we have done here is we have automated the enforcement of BitLocker encryption on our clients, right? We used CIs in Configuration Manager 1910 to do so, right? And basically what the CI did was it created 2 registry keys, which you can see here. This one with a value of 1, and this one with a value of 0. And with those 2 reg keys populated in the right place with the right values and of the right type, reg D word, that enables us to enforce encryption ASAP on our clients, on our Windows 10 clients. So if we go back here and just check this, you can see it is, it's doing exactly what we want. It's encrypting, and it will continue doing that until it's 100%. And basically our Windows 10 computer will register itself as compliant for both of those configuration baselines and for MBAM policy. So this is how you can enforce MBAM to encrypt with no user interaction, and you don't even have to worry about that pop-up or worry about users clicking postpone or closing the pop-up. It will all be automatic. So I hope you found this useful. Please check out my next video coming soon. Thank you. Bye.